Thank you very much, Dr. Abir, and it's always a pleasure to connect with you and also connect with students of the West of Scotland. The West of Scotland always had a special spot in my heart, you know, and this event has been a product of many years of planning with myself and Dr. Abir, and I think the kudos goes to you for putting such sessions together. And I've worked with you so much on the doctoral workshops and planning. You know, it's always good to know that you're still dedicated to driving our student development and seeing our PGR students succeed. And thank you once again. And to everyone here, thank you so much for making the time to attend. Like you all, I used to be a PhD student at the West of Scotland. It's an incredible university, provided me with the platform to grow and succeed. And for me, I always like to have these opportunities to always come back and provide my own little knowledge on how to navigate the ups and downs of the PhD. So I've got a few slides. Dr. Abir, just to confirm, we have just an hour for this session, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll try to keep it within an hour. I've got a couple of slides, but I'll try to talk through the slides in the next 20 minutes. Then I know you have lots of questions around the PhD, so I'm happy to take your questions, and we'll take it up from there. So okay, so the idea of today is to kind of look at the idea of doing the PhD, some of the challenges around completing your doctorate, some of the challenges, the inherent assumptions, some of the reasons why PhD students don't finish, why there are often difficulties around successful completions. And I think we'll kind of end with how to identify best practice that kind of enriches our approach to undertaking the PhD journey. Now, I always used to have this quote, and it used to always be by my office and also in my room. And it's by Hughes and Tite, and they kind of provide a very unique but honest reflection of the PhD. And they say the doctorate is more often a pilgrim's progress. It's a journey, but that journey has staged or staggered posts of hope, loss, fear, doubt, and achievement. So at times during the PhD, there's this hope that, oh yes, I'm going to finish with a PhD. I'm going to get an exciting job. I'm going to make my family proud. And there are times during the PhD, there'll be lots of losses in terms of not knowing how to navigate key elements of the PhD thesis. You know, fear of completion, fear of not being able to pass. You start to doubt yourself. You start to ask yourself, why am I actually doing this? What is the reason? What is the purpose? Will I get the desired returns when I finish? But at the end, when you're able to navigate this hope, loss, fear, doubt, it always comes with this sense of achievement. I think the PhD is like a project, you know, it's always difficult. You're like a project manager. You know, when you start putting the pieces together, it's often very difficult, and you find it difficult to see the real picture. But once you start getting to the end, you start to have that sense of achievement. And once you're able to cross the red line by defending your viva and completing your PhD, you have that real sense of achievement. But what are the key issues? I think the key issues around the PhD is there appears to be a growing rate of students who do not finish. And there are also growing concerns in the discourse around doctoral studies in literature and also in practitioner papers, whereby there are arguments that the attrition rates have continued to increase. You know, and some of the concerns are around the role of supervisors, that how the supervisors provide that engine room to ensuring that students, that PhD students succeed. You know, because the role of the supervisor plays an important role. So for instance, in scenarios where you have a supportive supervisor who is reliable, who is able to motivate you, who also understands the difficulties you're passing through, and who's able to guide you, right? You realize that students who have this type of supervisors often go ahead to do well. Now, on the other hand, if you have a supervisor who is not supportive, a supervisor who has no understanding of your context, your situation, who is not able to motivate you, who is absent, who discourages you, who in some cases may be malicious, then you find out that it provides a negative experience which defeats your purpose, defeats the purpose of achieving the PhD. But again, despite you having an exciting supervisor or a negative supervisor, the idea around the PhD is that it lies at your footstep, at your doorstep. And the idea of the PhD is about you being resilient, being motivated, and trying to avoid these bottlenecks, right? So irrespective of the bottlenecks, the success of the PhD lies at your doorstep. So some of the common issues that doctoral students often face have been actually highlighted on the screen. And for me, these are kind of the issues I did face when I was in my PhD. So for me, I'm a family man. I've got a wife, 2 kids, and I'm like a village chief back home in Nigeria, right? So I've got like 25 people back home waiting on me to send money back, right? And being an international student, you're limited by 20 hours. So there's a limit to how much you can earn in this country, and you still have to pay the tuition fees. Now, for some of you who are paying tuition fees, you kind of have an understanding of what I'm talking about. The university, of course, they are very supportive, but when it comes to tuition fees, sometimes, it's not an easy process, So you can imagine working around the family issues, working hard to pay your tuition fees. Now, those kind of feeds into challenges such as the lack of motivation. You start to ask yourself, why am I doing this? You now look at how much time you have left, and you realize that 3 years or 4 years may not even be enough to undertake this PhD. Now, one thing that people don't really speak about are the elements of health and depression that PhD students face. Prior to doing my PhD, I could say I was one of the most healthy people on earth. I used to eat healthy, I used to do lots of exercises. But for some reason, I started to have a bit of health-related problems from nowhere. And sometimes you realize you're alone, because one, you are so much embedded in your work, you don't have time for family, you don't have time for friends. It's all about you and your studies. And sometimes this kind of provides what I call a dark cloud, which in most cases, if not properly managed, leads to what I call depression. Then there are issues around supervisor, not getting feedback from your supervisor not being an expert in your research area, your supervisor not providing you with enough support. And of course, the need for jobs. You want to get teaching jobs that can enhance your career, teaching jobs that can actually help you get a good job after the PhD, teaching jobs that can help you be knowledgeable about theory and practice and provide you with a strong opportunity to be able to answer questions in your Viva. So these are pretty much the key questions. Now, if you don't get academic jobs, you often have to do menial jobs that, in most times are not very rewarding, but of course, you've got to pay your rent, you've got to survive. So those are pretty much some of the common problems that international students face. And these were also some of the problems I did face when I was doing my PhD. But for me, again, I didn't want to be defeated with those problems. I realized that I had to achieve. I'd failed before in the past, and I told myself I wouldn't fail. So for me, the idea was, what do I put in place, right? This calls for a plan. And for me, what I did was I kind of provided myself with an understanding of what I wanted to do. And I was able to locate my ideology around a theory I came up with called the logics of transformative reflexivity. And the idea of my theory was that it kind of made me understand that for me as a doctoral student, and for me to pass, I had to understand my social and institutional context. I had to be introspective, whereby I'm always reflecting and asking myself, what could I have done better? What can I do better to improve myself? I had to also convince myself that the PhD lies at my doorstep. And as much as possible, I had to do everything possible to help me achieve my goal. And I realized that the strength of the PhD was also my strength. And as such, I had to make sense of my perceived reality. But more importantly, the idea was I had to understand my context. I had to understand what I needed to do to achieve my goals. So through my introspection, I realized that my first plan was to have knowledge of the field. Now, how do you have knowledge about the field, right? It's all about reading. So my PhD was on trust and institutions with a case study of how Nigerian firms did their internationalization process. So what I had to do was The key elements of my PhD, I broke them into the 3 key parts: institutions, trust, and internationalization. So this kind of forms the core of my literature review. So at the beginning of my Viva, I put this schematic view for the examiner to say, this is what I've done. These are the key authors in my literature review. Now, going back to my plan was that I had to have knowledge. And to have knowledge, I had to be relevant. I had to understand the relevant authors and the relevant studies. Because the idea of a PhD is you must be an expert. Now, you don't want a scenario whereby you've studied for 3 or 4 years and people come to ask you questions and you are unable to have a very coherent answer. So instead of institutions, who are the key authors? I went and read all about institutional logics from Thornton and Ocasio. I read about embeddedness, culture, norms, network. I ensured I had a very robust understanding of those key elements. I moved on to trust. I read books, I read dissertations, I read conference papers, book chapters, articles, to ensure that I had knowledge of the state-of-art contemporary studies that had been done in that field. And the same in internationalization. The truth is, you can't go into a PhD Viva without having knowledge of your field. And that is what the examiners want to see. For me to give you that PhD, for them to give you that PhD, you must have knowledge of your field. So what I did again is, it wasn't about reading. And in terms of reading, what I often find students is, students do a lot of research, they do a lot of literature review, but they don't show evidence. And one thing about the PhD is about showing evidence, showing how you navigated things. So every time I did my reading, I always provided some kind of evidence for myself. So this schematic view shows how many papers I kind of read or kind of captured or in my searches. So for instance, I did the first search, I got 5,332 on those key 3 topics. I now kind of aligned my search by ensuring that the papers that came out were kind of consistent with my research objective and research questions. Right? So this kind of gives you an idea of how you're able to kind of show evidence. It's a product of a systematic literature review. But some supervisors don't like systematic literature review. But for me, I always kind of recommend, even if you don't do a systematic literature review, it's always good to show evidence. And this evidence helps you back that evidence and that knowledge of your field, showing how many articles you've read, how many articles you've come across, and how you're able to identify the key articles that relate to your field. It's all about evidence, but it's all about having knowledge of the field. Now, what I did is, in my meetings with my supervisors, they often told me, oh, you must go and read this person's paper. Go and read this person's paper. And for me, I always did that. And one day I asked myself, by building on my theory of introspection or reflexivity, by reading their papers is good, it's enough. But what about reaching out to these people? What about emailing them? What about following them on LinkedIn? So what I did was, beyond reading their papers, I started to reach out to these scholars. So my far right, the man with the glasses and the beard, is Mark Saunders. So all of you know Mark Saunders from the Research Methods book. I had a bit of questions around research onion and some areas around philosophical choices, right? And I messaged, I think for Saunders, what I did was, I went for a conference. So the first conference in my 3 months in my PhD, and I met Mark Saunders. And the idea around those conferences is that it brings you closer to these leading experts. These people, you read their books, it brings you closer to them, and you realize that they were once students like you. And by meeting Mark Saunders, we exchanged emails, and I was able to reach out to him via emails by kind of asking him questions around philosophical choices and methodological approaches. The lady up is Emma Bell. So if you know Emma Bell from Bryman and Bell book, Research Methods, right? I emailed Emma Bell, and she will come back to me and give me insights. Well, why not do it this way? Why not do it this way? The others, Peter Lee, Guido Molorin, Isaac Amuako, Mark Granoveta, these are the key authors in my field. And one thing about these key authors is they're always happy to help you. They're always happy, you're polite, I've read your book, I'm excited in your theories, but can I clarify this? And what I did in my PhD was those emails, I took their permission and I included the extract of their emails in my appendix. So that even when I was in my Viva and the examiners were asking me, what do I know about this area? And I said, sir, if I permit me to refer you to my appendix, in my conversations with Guido Mollery, like this is what we kind of explain. But I think the idea around reaching out to these main scholars is that it brings you up to speed on the contemporary things around the theories or concepts you want to use. But more importantly, it gives you that level of confidence, and that level of confidence that most PhD students don't have. Once you have knowledge of the field, you're able to reach out to the main scholars in your field, that kind of enhances your confidence to be able to continue your journey. But one of the key challenges I had was in terms of writing. And what I see a big major mistake a lot of PhD students do is they don't write and they keep their PhDs till maybe their third year. But what I did was, from my first day, I set a timeline. I told myself, the PhD is 3 years. I think now for you guys it's 4 years. Then with your visa, it was only 3 year. So after 3 years, you have to reapply. But I think now they give you a straight visa for 4 years. So then it was 3 years for us. And I think the word count then for PhD was 80,000 minimum. So I think it was 80,000 words. I think that was the word count. But of course, you don't want to write 80,000 words. You want to write in excess of 80,000 words. And when I did the division across the number of months, I realized if I was going to achieve that word count, I had to write at least 500 to 700 words a day. So I did that from my first day, and I was writing, every day writing. I see students do a lot of reading. Oh, I've read this, I've read that. Where is the evidence? We want to see what you've been writing, because the PhD, at the end of the PhD, you have to submit your Viva. You have to submit your thesis. And the thesis is a product of all the reading and writing you've done. The truth is, as you're reading your writing, as you're writing your reading, you are enhancing your knowledge. And one of the interesting parts which students don't know is when you get to your third year or your fourth year, and you go back to what you've done in your first year, you'll be surprised that what you've been doing doesn't really make sense. So for instance, when I was in my third year and I was reading what I had written in my first year, my chapter 1, it wasn't making sense. The concept and the writing style was incomprehensible. I couldn't even imagine that I was the one that had done it. This is because over the 3 years, you find yourself improving. You find your knowledge of the field has improved. The theories have improved. Even your research questions and your research aim and objectives have kind of improved. But it's only by writing that you are able to have more knowledge, you are able to improve your writing style, and also your presentation style. Because the truth is, what my dad used to tell me is, you can't learn how to write if you haven't read people's writings. So in writing and reading people's work, I'm writing and I'm kind of improving myself. And it also helps me when I present, when I go for transfer events, and when I go for Vivas and conferences. So for instance, if I'm reading a journal will say, the concept of trust has been defined across scholars. So that is how you would read it. That is how you would write it. But because you've been writing, you realize that that is now the way you would even define it if asked verbally. So if you're not writing, when they ask what is trust, you say, well, trust is this and that. But because you've been writing and because you've been reading and you've been improving your knowledge, the way you would answer that question in a Viva is different. So Kingesly, what is trust? The concept of trust has been defined by scholars. In sociology, Zucker in 2019 defines trust as a set of shared expectations. In economics, Gambetta and Zucker go ahead to define trust as that subjective probability, whereby, and so the way you write is the way you also speak. So everything kind of adds up. But beyond writing, what I also did was I ensured I read one journal a day. A journal kind of contains about maybe 13 to 20 pages. What I'll do is when I wake up in the morning, I do my prayers. I'm a religious guy. I start to read in a day. And by reading journals every day, I started to realize that one, I was having a strong knowledge of the field. And I started to identify that there were key authors that some journals always identified. And by improving knowledge of my field and my knowledge of the subject area, when I went into my supervisory meetings, I could feel that even my supervisors realized that I was beginning to have that knowledge. Because the only way you can define knowledge and the way you can express knowledge is by reading. If you don't read, you can't have knowledge. So you try writing at least 500 to 700 words a day. Try to read at least one journal a day, at least. Even if you don't finish it, try reading it up to a substantial part. If you do that every day, just try doing that for 1 month, and you will see that there's a change. But one of the key things a lot of PhD students don't do is networking. Networking via conferences, networking through trainings, networking by joining associations. So the good part for me was that I had some very good supervisory, had a very good supervisory team. And my supervisor in my 3rd or 4th month encouraged me to go for a conference. So it was a Fins conference in Dublin. I wasn't ready, but he said, put in something. And I just put in a few things, about 3,000 words, and I submitted to the conference. And once you're submitting for doctoral conferences, they are always very supportive. Irrespective of how good your paper is, they would always bring you in and hear your points out and also give you feedback. So it was at this conference in Dublin that I went. I got some good feedback on my research. I was able to meet Mark Saunders, meet Guido Mollerin, those key authors. And for me, it was rewarding. Because for me, I started to realize, well, that if Mark Saunders can do it, then I can do it. I was inspired. But I was building my networks. And I was meeting scholars, I was meeting other PhD students. And I was inspired about the PhD students who were in their 3rd year at that time, what they were doing. And I was learning, okay, that's how to present. Oh, that's not how to present. So I was building my contacts, I was building my confidence, I was enhancing my knowledge, I was getting feedback by experts. And as much as possible, I was going for conferences. I looked out for the free conferences because sometimes I couldn't even afford conferences. But I was trying, I was making sure I was engaged, I was building my networks. Now, one of the key things PhD students don't know is about the ethos online. So like I said, you can only learn how to write a PhD if you've seen other people's PhDs. My father used to tell me you can only learn how to drive if you've seen someone drive. You can only learn how to swim if you watch people swim. So you can only learn how to do a PhD, or you can only do a PhD if you see other people's PhDs. Now, there's a British Library ethos is a warehouse of all the PhDs that have been done in the UK. So if you go in there and just type in trust and networks, or consumer behavior and marketing, or developmental economics in Nigeria, you will see every PhD that has been written around those topics. Just put British Library Ethos UK. It's free of charge. You just have to register, but it's free of charge. Then you can go in there and look at people's PhDs. Look at how they've done it. Look at the organization of their PhDs, how they've structured their chapter 1, their literature review. Have they included conceptual frameworks? What have they done? Before I found out about this ethos, what I used to do was that one of the unique things about UWS is that they've got a section in the library that used to be on the 1st floor where they have everybody's PhDs. And I'm sure it's still there in the UWS library. So I would go to the business element and I'll be looking at everybody's PhD. In fact, I used to do that every evening before going home. So I'll go to the library, I'll take out people's PhDs and I'll see how they've done it. In fact, it was in one of those PhDs that I saw that one of the past PhD students had reached out to some of the key experts and included the responses that they've given to him via email in his appendix. So that's where I kind of got those inspirations. So I always go in, I spend 20, 30 minutes, look at people's PhDs to kind of have an idea of how to design my PhD. Then it was after that that I found out about the Ethos Library, whereby I would go in and look at PhDs that have been done across the UK. Now, within the PhD, and by the time you get towards your 3rd year, some of the questions you start to ask yourself is, what is original about your work? Because this question will come out in your PhD viva in so many ways. It will also come out in your transfer event in so many ways. What is original about your work? The truth is the PhD is a product of the originality of your research. Because if your work is not original, then it's almost impossible for you to become a doctor. It's difficult for you to have that title, PhD. Your work must be original. And these questions will be asked in so many ways. So for me, I always struggled with that answer. What is original about your work? Until I stumbled on this paper called What is Originality in the Humanities and Social Sciences? And it was done by PhD students in Princeton, Joshua Guesco. And I've shared this across so many of my friends who are here today and those that I've been able to mentor over the past years. And in this work, Joshua Guesco and colleagues identified about 12 key principles that specifies the originality of every thesis, originality of every dissertation, or every article. So for me, I kind of looked at those 12 key principles, and I was able to identify 6 of those principles that aligns best with my work. So for instance, the first one was an original approach. So I kind of looked at an original approach in my studies. So first, I looked at an understudied area. So the concept of trust has been studied across board, right? But what I found out was that trust has not really been explored from an African context, from a Nigerian context. But in that Nigerian context, I realized that Nigeria is made up of 250 million people and has about 525 multi-ethnic groups. Now, the three major ethnic blocks are Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. So I said, okay, let me investigate how trust works around those 3 major ethnic blocks, because I believe that was an understudied area. So given that it's an understudied area, my approaches should also be an original approach, because it's an original topic. So my topic is original because it looks at trust across 3 cultural blocks. My approach was original because 1, I undertook an original method in examining my data. So in terms of my method, I adopted semi-structured interviews. I used case studies. I used a unique methodological strategy called reflexivity. And with reflexivity, I was able to bring myself into the real world of the local actors, but I was also able to bring the audience, that is my examiners and people who will read my thesis, into the real world of those local actors by narrating my experience, my difficulties of getting to the field. In fact, it was almost 20 pages speaking about my access to data. So for instance, my research was undertaken in 3 parts of Nigeria. It was spanned over a period of 2.5 months. I undertook a partial ethnography whereby I lived with these informal traders. I spent close to 4 weeks with them. I can remember when I tried to leave, they didn't even want me to go. They wanted to give me additional 2 wives to marry, because I lived with them and tried to understand their field, tried to understand their experience of doing entrepreneurship, how they were able to do business without using contracts, but based on trust and supported by elements of family, culture, and religion. So by undertaking an original method, I was able to come up with original data, which gave me original results. So when asking your advisor, right, what is original in your work? You now define what is originality. So thank you, sir, for that question. Originality is providing a single technique and observational result in an otherwise manner, but through a competent bit of research. And in terms of originality in my work, I drew on the expert advice of Joshua Guesco et al. In 2004, where they adopted 12 key principles for originality. But in my own way, I adopted the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 12th principles of originality. In terms of the 4th principle, I undertook an understudied area. And you speak about your understudied area. In terms of original topic, I adopted the 7th principle, which is original topic. You explain it. So once you're able to identify to the examiner what makes your work original, you are able to identify your work's unique selling point. Don't go into your viva without having the originality element of your work. You must know what sets your work apart. It will come out in different ways in your viva, in so many ways, but you must have a robust defense. Again, before I actually come into this part, another thing you also want to know is that the PhD viva or the PhD process, but more importantly, the viva and your dissertation or your thesis is all about justifications. It's all about you justifying key things, qualitative and quantitative. Why have you chosen qualitative instead of quantitative? So you must know those things. But we'll come back to that again. Again, you want to also be able to ensure that you keep in mind these key 3 points. How does your work contribute to theory? How does your work contribute to policy? How does your work contribute to practice? So theory is, how does your work extend what has been done by academics? Does it advance it? Are you coming up with a new theory? What contribution is your work doing to already existing studies? In terms of policy, how would your work be of use to decision makers, to policy makers in the UK or in Nigeria where you've done your research, or in India where you've done your research? How will it inform policymakers in making decisions that will be of benefit to the context in which you've studied? How would your work be of use to practitioners? So if you examine entrepreneurs in Africa, how would your work be of benefit to them? What is it that they need to know that they don't already know? So once you're able to identify what is original about your work and what are the key contributions of your work, then you're almost there. In fact, you're already there. But I think another thing again that students don't know is all about practice. And the PhD is all about practice. And for those of you that are strong fans of football, for those of you that know Cristiano Ronaldo, you see him before he goes for matches, he's always preparing, he's always practicing. In fact, he's my role model, because for me, I see the effort he puts in his practice. He's always practicing because he wants to be number one. He wants to be the best. You too can be the best, but it starts with practicing. So from my first year, I've been practicing for my viva. And by practicing for your viva, you're already practicing for your transfer event. So what I always did was I always had these 20 key questions. And these key 20 questions was always on my door. And the key questions are always the same when you go into your viva. So I'll pitch to myself, because the first question they will ask you is, summarize your thesis in 5 minutes. Or summarize your thesis in 3 minutes. So I would practice. They can now say, can you summarize your work now in 1 sentence? I would practice that again. What is the idea that binds your work together? What is the motivation? What inspired you? So for instance, if they ask you to summarize your thesis in 1 sentence, a logical way to follow that, to do that, is speak about the introduction, a little bit of introduction, talk about your research aim, the aim of the study, right? Research objective. And in order to achieve the research aim, my approach was to address these key objectives. Then talk briefly on literature review, speak about what is original about your work and the key findings and the contributions. But you must also know what motivated you to do the PhD. So for instance, for me, I used to be a local tailor back home in Nigeria, right? And when I used to go to the market to do my business, I realized that there was something that glued all the traders in that market together. So for instance, sometimes I would go to buy materials to make clothes, like cloth materials, and I might not have enough money. And the trader who is selling those clothes to me wouldn't collect money from me. He would tell me, okay, Kingsley, when you come back tomorrow, you pay me. Sometimes I might not even come back that week. I could come back the next week and I will pay him, and he will still give me lots of goods on credit. But for me, it was kind of interesting because I didn't really know what was the lubricant that kind of facilitated that process. And it wasn't just particularly me, but it was something that went on in that market. But I realized that it was something called trust, because he knew that I would come back, because he knew that I was a member of the association, because he also knew that I belonged to I knew some of his networks, and I also belonged to some other cultural association, and I also belonged to his church. So I now realized that, oh, it was kind of important. I could explore this in detail, to provide a very good research that provides opportunity for policymakers, for theorists, and also for practitioners. And my chance meeting with my supervisor illuminated my understanding of that field and drove me to pursuing that PhD. So you want to have a compelling story, because this is a kind of conversation that would come up. What is your motivation? Some of the other questions that can come out, who are the key authors in your field? What are the latest things that are happening? And you can only know those things if you're reading, if you're going for conferences. Key questions that would always come out in your Viva, your transfer events. Why have you chosen quantitative over qualitative? That will come out in many ways. And you must have at least 10 answers. If you're using a quantitative research, you need to know why a qualitative is not the best approach for your research. If you're using a qualitative, you need to know why a quantitative is not the best. So a good way to answer it is, thank you very much, sir. Right now, no two methods supersedes the other. While the quantitative research looks at numerical statistication, larger number sizes, and leads to generalization, right? A qualitative goes in depth to bring you closer into the real world of the local actors. It captures the narratives of local actors, captures their experiences and their true discourse in a way that a quantitative research may not be able to do it. Now, scholars, you now start to bring in scholars. Scholars such as Greg Guest and Robert Yin argue that quantitative research does this. So you have like 10 answers to support your discussions. Because the idea around the PhD is, why have you not done this? Why did you do this? So you must be able to justify everything. Why are you using this philosophy? Why are you using this research approach? Why have you used inductive instead of abductive? Why have you used abductive instead of this? You must know that. Why have you used semi-structured instead of unstructured? You must know those things. But it's all about practice. It's all about practice. So for me, I was always pitching. From my very first week, I'd already started pitching myself. I was always practicing. By the time I went for my transfer events, I was ready. My Viva, I was very, very confident because I knew that I had knowledge of my field. I knew I'd practiced. I knew I'd reached out to the key authors in my field. I knew that I'd done a lot of reading. I knew I'd been writing 500 to 700 words a day. I knew I'd read one journal every day. Now, one of the key things that helped me in my PhD was I did a bit of teaching. In fact, I started teaching in my 6 months, and I was very lucky to do that. I was one of the first people to be teaching during my PhD. And for me, I realized that I had to put in effort in my teaching because I knew if I did my teaching very well, I could open doors for other people to do their own teaching. Because it was all about trust. It was about the university trusting the PhD students. So that is why whenever you have an opportunity to teach, always do that. You have to give it your best, because if you don't do it well, you are closing the door for other people to teach. But the good thing about my teaching was that I was teaching a field related to my PhD. And you know, with students, you can't go into a class without having knowledge of that subject area. And when students start to ask you questions, you always have to have an answer. You can't say, oh, let me go back and read, or let me come back to you. So with the teaching, I realized I was improving my knowledge and my way to address questions. I was improving my confidence. Now, some of you might say, oh, there are no opportunities for us to teach. Absolutely. And it's not just there. I know the business school has done incredibly so much in the west of Scotland to create opportunities for people to teach. But sometimes, even if there are no teaching opportunities, you need to be smart. Dr. Abie can confirm, she always advises us that sometimes you can always follow your supervisors to their classes and sit and learn. Sometimes you can even teach for free. So you can put it on your resume, but also enhance your knowledge. But the truth is, and once you're doing that, people will see that you have that appetite to want to learn. And you always get a job. So rather than having those menial jobs, I know the menial jobs are good, they help pay the bills. Try to look out for some kind of jobs related to around teaching that can help you enhance your employability and also help you enhance knowledge of your subject area. Publications is a very big thing, but it's also a very useful thing. And during my PhD period, I tried to publish. I think I even collected an award for one of the for publication output during my PhD, and that was in my first year. So I had the highest output in my first year. So I was kind of competing with people in my fourth year at that time, in the fourth year at that time. So because I was always reading and writing, I realized that, okay, I could start writing a journal. It's not really easy, but if you can, it's always encouraged. Try to publish at least 1 or 2 papers before you finish. Even if you can't publish an article, let it be a book chapter. And that is why those conferences are very good, because when you go for conferences, they give you feedback and it can help you enhance your writing skill and also help you enhance the way you publish, your publication approach. And the good thing about publication is that when you go for those vivas and the external sees that you've published, it kind of gives them some kind of confidence that your work is publishing. Now that doesn't mean that if you don't publish, you won't pass your viva. No, but it's encouraged. If you can, go for it, do it. And supervisors always want to see their students publish. So, but the only way you can publish is by reading and writing and seeing how people have done it. Then I think finally it's all about achieving a timeline. So for me, I wanted to finish my PhD in record time, 3 years. And in fact, I did in record time 3 years. I actually finished a week before my 3rd year. Right? But you can only set a timeline. You can only do that if you set a timeline. So I knew I wanted to finish in my 3rd year, but I said, you know what? I'll try as much as possible to get the chunk of the work done in my 2nd year. And I kept on pushing. Some of you that know, I think Ayo is here. Ayo knows me very well. I spent 3 Christmases in my office. My 24th midnight, 24th New Year's, Christmas Eve, I spent it in my office for 2016, 2017, 2018. I spent Christmas and New Year's Eve in the office. I used to sleep in the office. I put in that effort. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had a timeline. So my advice is set a timeline, get to work, remember the clock is ticking, but it is achievable. I'm not the smartest, I'm not the brightest, but if I can do it, then you all can do it. So don't be scared, get to work, and it can be done. So let me stop here. I'm mindful that we don't have too much time so we can take questions. Thank you, Dr. Abir.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Kings, for the amazing presentation for today. Thank you very, very much. Guys, do you have any questions for Kingsley?
Please ask your questions. I'm free to take
or put it in the chat or whatever. Adeli, just go ahead.
Ayo, please go on, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kingsley. You know, it's a privilege for me to have met you when you're about graduating. You know, I don't know if I start talking about Dr. Kingsley and how he has impacted me, then it means we are going to be taking another class, and I don't think that is what we need. You know, he is my role model. He interviewed me when I was coming before I was given my PhD. You know, he even changed my direction. I was coming for MPhil, and I ended up doing my PhD. And it was very, very tough when I started. And he was there to support me. I took over his seat, you know, as at the time when it is very, very difficult for anyone to get teaching. I think I was 5 months. He took me up and, you know, and got me the teaching job, which my supervisor was even surprised. How did you get it? And ever since then, he has always been there to support. He's always ready to come down to your level, support you, teach you. And I took over his seat, and I refused to remove his picture and his award because I want to do the same thing. And I'm happy I've not disappointed him, you know, and did not disappoint myself. And I'm sure he's proud of me, you know, and many people are still emulating him. So what I want to say is that, you know, the only thing I could not achieve is I promised myself I'm also going to finish, you know, in 2.5 years, but COVID did not allow it. You know, it's unfortunate. I could not break that record. But for the teaching, I think I've tried as much. And thank you, Dr. Kingesly. But one thing I want to say about today's presentation is about the process. It is very rigorous, and having someone to support you is very important. You know, and what I discovered is that most of us are always, is sort of, because we know it's a lonely journey, we have always put to ourselves, we don't want to go out, you know, we want to be ourselves, but it doesn't help. It can lead to depression. And I've always been trying as much as possible to be friendly, even up till MBA student, master student, undergraduate student. Recently, some of my undergraduate students, I said they want to go out with me and have a beer outside, this, that. You know, I said, I appreciate it, but I'm very busy. I'm sorry, you know, if it's virtual, I'm ready, you know. So that was how important, you know, hanging out and increasing your network is. But one thing I want to ask, the question I have for Dr. Kingesly is that now it talks about the challenges of having to manage your supervisor and also manage your job and manage everything. You know, looking at when you did your own PhD, there were no lockdown, there were no restriction, there is hangout, because I remember then I carried my paper and come and meet you at your seat, and you encouraged me even to go for BAM when I was just 3 months. You know, it's like throwing me in the ring, but you are there with me, and I was able to present at BAM and got some feedback. So now that those opportunities are not there, you know, some people are really going through tough time. You know, some doesn't even have direction. I'm about to finish. Now I've submitted all my chapter. You know, some people doesn't even have direction. Some people, their supervisor themselves are very busy because of the online, not because they don't want to help, but because of the situation. What is your advice in this era of new normal? Thank you.
Absolutely, Ayo, and it's a pleasure to have played an important role in your development. I can remember when you did your first presentation in BAM, and the next BAM event, I saw you already chairing sessions, you know, in your first year, and I still remember that, and I would say, well done. Well, I do recognize that these are very trying times. You know, it's more difficult than how it was when I was doing my PhD. Yeah. Studying online is different, you know, being isolated from the field, isolated from colleagues, isolated from your supervisor. It comes with a lot of challenges. But the truth is, we must always look at the brighter side. And the brighter side is, how do we walk around these situations? You know, and it's still all about you being in a very positive mindset. Your supervisors too may not also be there, but the truth is, how do you walk around the PhD? How do you ensure that you are still able to achieve? So some of us, I know students who still have a lot of contacts. You know, they have WhatsApp groups. You know, the Nigerian Student Society, I know they have a WhatsApp group where they do keep in touch. And the good thing is that a lot of things, we're already returning to normal. So things are kind of looking better. But the idea is, you need to keep yourself motivated. You need to keep on learning. You need to keep on reading. Sometimes your supervisors, and most times they won't be there. But you need to always have a role model. You must look for a mentor. You know, those mentors, there are mentors who will always be there to support you. And there are always mentors within the business school that are always there. I remember when Abil used to be in charge of the doctoral students, she always tried to bring the PhD community together. I don't know if that still exists. Yeah. You know, so by bringing us together to have presentations, do awards, get us to mingle, you know, those kind of things. I know it couldn't have been done during the COVID era, but I think those are things that still needs to be done. But sometimes it also has to be student-led, because we can't also expect the academics to be doing everything for us. You know, society is like, the career is also an incredible opportunity to also meet people and also learn. So there are also societies within the school that can also help you meet people, mingle, learn, and also get experience of how to present, and also how to make justifications when you go for presentations. But I think the idea is within you. It's all about you. It's a project. It's a lonely journey. So you need to keep on motivating yourself. You need to have role models, people you look up to. You need to look for people that can also mentor you, people that can also reach out. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be somebody who has finished. It can also be some people within the PhD that are more motivated, more resilient, and have a superior driving force. Keep good contact with your friends, you know, but more importantly, don't be depressed. Don't think it's not achievable. I've seen students who never believe that they can do it, but they go into that Viva and they put up an incredible performance, right? So everyone here can be a doctor tomorrow and will be a doctor tomorrow, but it's all about effort, resilience, motivation. It can be done. it can be done.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think I saw a question from Ikraf in the chat box. Ikraf said, okay, so there are lots of questions in the chat box. So maybe I'll just be going to the chat box, and if you have your hands up, you can also ask questions. Then, so I've got the first question from Fatima. Fatima says, in my opinion, even some conferences will publish your conference paper. It's worth presenting because you will get feedback and networking. Well, in a way, yes. The truth is, when you submit for those conferences, right? So for instance, for most of the conferences, don't really publish the. So for instance, there are two. So the conferences will have the main conference and the doctoral consortium. So the doctoral consortium, what they always do is they kind of publish the abstract, right? Because they feel that maybe at that level, your presentation or your PhD submission or what you submitted for that conference is not strong enough. So at that point, what they're kind of providing you with is feedback. But I've also seen some conferences whereby they give you feedback and they ask you to resubmit your conference paper and they publish it in the conference proceedings, but not as an article, but in the conference proceedings. So that's a very good way to have an output, right? Then again, in the conferences, if you think you've also improved yourself, you can now also go in to submit a full paper, because most times what you submit as a PhD student is a developmental paper or an extended abstract. So it depends on what you're submitting. So if most of the conferences always like to publish the full paper in the conference proceedings. But again, the idea is getting feedback. The idea is looking at where you need to improve your skills in terms of what theories you've used, what methods you've used. I've seen scenarios whereby students use the wrong philosophy and they go into the conferences and they get some kind of feedback saying, why have you used this philosophy? So previously, in terms of my approach to reasoning, I always thought about the inductive, and I felt inductive was the best. I only knew deductive and inductive. I didn't know that there was a new one called, a new approach to reasoning called abductive, which is an extension of the inductive, but builds more, explains more about the inductive. When I was at the conference, someone said, have you known about abductive? Go and read about it. So, okay. So the idea of those conferences, it helps you enhance your knowledge, improves your writing skill, and so that by the time you're able to improve your knowledge of the subject area, you can actually write a very good paper.
Yeah.
Another question is, what do I do? I've attended my supervisor teaching class to learn the process of delivering session. The truth is, getting teaching is not an easy feat anywhere. Even after you become a PhD, you get a PhD and you're looking for jobs, it's not easy. It's difficult. Getting any job nothing in life is easy. But the truth is, your goal is to ask yourself, why do I want to learn how to teach? You want to learn how to teach, one, to improve your subject knowledge of subject matter, and also improve your employability. Because the truth is, when you finish the PhD, employers and universities want to see that, oh, he's been teaching before. No university would want to really employ you when you don't have any teaching experience. They don't want to do that because there are lots of people in the market that have got extensive teaching. In fact, by the time I finished my PhD, I taught about 10 different courses. I was even a module coordinator for global economics because I was aggressive, I was learning. But teaching again can also be difficult because if you get lots of teaching, it's very hard to combine it with your studies, except you are proactive, except you are a hard worker. And that is why some supervisors will say, don't take teaching at this point. Why not take teaching in your third year? Because you think if you take teaching in your first and second year, you can be overwhelmed because students will ask you lots of questions. There will be lots of things you have to do. You might want to pass out. But the good thing about teaching is, how do you get it? So sometimes the opportunities can present itself, right? But sometimes you have to take that teaching, you have to take that ownership by saying, supervisor, I want to follow you to classes. I want to sit down. Let me take some of your tutorials for you. I don't even want to get paid, but let me just come in and learn. You have to be out there. I can remember myself when I didn't have any teaching and I realized I wanted to teach. I went to meet the head of the person who was in charge of teaching. I said, I want to teach, give me teaching. And she said there was no teaching, and I kept on going until I got one. So sometimes you have to be out there. But sometimes you need to also look beyond the university. I've got friends who also do a lot of teaching outside the university, even in high schools and the colleges, right? The colleges beside the school, there are always opportunities. You need to be out there. It won't come to you. You need to look for it. My question is, how did you manage to overcome stress and depression that you encountered? It was all about reflection. It was all about having a positive mindset. I wanted to have that positive mindset. So, as in, sometimes it could be very lonely. You know, I can even remember at times my wife was feeling that I didn't have a time. I wasn't even speaking to my mom and dad because I didn't really have that time. It was all about my studies. But I knew I had to be in the right frame of mind. I also knew I had to be healthy, so I did lots of exercises, right? I had to eat healthy, but I had to have a positive mindset. And I kept on pushing and driving myself. I had role models that I look up to. So it's all about having that positive mindset. You must have that positive mindset and having a goal and telling yourself, this is what I want to achieve. And this is why I need to achieve this. So it's having that positive mindset and motivating yourself. Okay, I think the Gabi ends where it says, guys, you have to support each other. You should not wait for the opportunity to come to you. Go and look for it. Absolutely, I do agree. Okay.
Any other questions, guys? Because it's 2 minutes past 1, and we don't want it to take more time from Kingsley. We know how busy he is. Any other questions?
Any other questions? I'm also on LinkedIn. So for those of you that are not on LinkedIn, it's good to join LinkedIn. Look at my networks. If you're looking for jobs, there are some people you might see that might be helpful in my network. Just add me on LinkedIn. It's always good. We can always catch up. It's always very easy to connect with me on LinkedIn. I always accept. Timmy along here says, I have a question. Do you want to ask verbally or you want to type it?
Yes, I don't mind asking verbally.
Hi, Timmy.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful session. I'm sorry I didn't join on time, so I missed the first part, but I will catch up. So here's my question. It's quite similar to what you've been discussing all along, but I really, I'm under Miss Dr. Christine Harrison, and he's been encouraging me, but there's just so much that he can do because I have a very peculiar case. I am here all by myself. My husband and my kids are not here yet. I am pregnant. I'm a first year PhD student, and it's been so overwhelming. And when I had my master's, it was years ago, pre-COVID. Things weren't like this. I'm finding it so hard to balance then and now because you come to school and there's practically nobody. You're coming from a home where there's nobody, you're alone, and you're in school, there's nobody in school. There's no student life, all those things that would drive depression away and all of that. So what I've always been asking my supervisor, but he hasn't really been able to help me is, are there any groups that we could form? I know Mr. Ayodele spoke about that people call him up to hang out and just, let us bring that back and support each other. It goes a long way. I do very well studying in groups, even if just two of us. I have someone across the table and then we're studying together. Even if we're studying practically different things, it helps me a lot to just have someone to encourage me. How many pages have you read? How many pages have you written? But there's none of that here. And it's really affecting my work. I feel that I'm not as productive as I should be. So if you have any advice for me, I would really love that. And everyone here, if you have a study group or something that I can join, I don't mind.
Timmy, thank you so much for that brilliant question. And the truth is, you are not alone. A lot of people here are going through that. Even me after the PhD, I'm still going through that. Sometimes you feel isolated. So it's not just even the PhD, and that's life. But the truth is, the question you need to ask yourself is, how do I make the best out of it? So, for instance, people like Ayo and Adejoke here, what I know is that they have a body system. So what they do is, even during the restrictions, they have online body system whereby they meet up online and they read and write together. So for instance, they can say, guys, let's meet by 5 p.m. and we'll read till 9 p.m., right? No distractions, and we'll read together, right? So I know a lot of people do those type of things, because the truth is, we're already returning to in-person activities, but no one knows tomorrow. But making sense of the situation now is, how do we enhance our network, the networking element? So a reading body, a writing body, then we used to have writing sessions within the school, but again, you need to have people that kind of align with your thinking set, people that are kind of familiar with your process. You know, so have a writing body, have reading body. It could be 3 or 4 of you. You meet up 5 o'clock, you meet and you discuss and you probe and you ask yourself questions. People that have the same mindset. Now, I understand how difficult it is being pregnant. I've not been pregnant before, but my wife has been pregnant, and I know how difficult it is. It's not easy. Nobody can explain it to you. It's difficult. And Abir has had a couple of students who've also passed through this process, and she's always been an excellent guide. So I know Abir can guide you. But the truth is, it's not even easy doing the PhD not being pregnant. And doing a PhD being pregnant is 10 times harder. Mm-hmm. But from hearing you speak today, I know you're a very confident and very motivated person. And I see that passion in the way you've spoken today. The truth is, yes, the pregnancy is there, but the truth is the PhD also has to be done, but you've also got to manage it so that your health remains important. So continue to build the networks. Christian Harrison is a great guy. Speak to him. You can always also reach out to Dr. Abid, reach out to Dr.
Absolutely.
Reach out to me. You know, we can always provide that networking. Ayo is one of the most supportive people I know in this university, and I know he has a network. So Ayo, I think you might need to expand your network to capture every other person. I see your hand up here. Ayo, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, what I want to say is that, you know, it's a sort of an advice, maybe because I was lucky to meet people like Dr. Kingesly and the other Kingesly, you know, Aziz. I met a lot of great guys that were about passing out. And in fact, some of them even still come to my house. I go to Dr. Kingesly's house. You know, if I have problem, I call 1 or 2. Recently, I was having problem with my, you know, multiple regression. I called the other Kingesly, and from that, we discuss other things, and also, you know, other things that will be beneficial to him. So what I want to say is that don't feel you're alone. Just go online, look for any PhD student. Just email them. I'm sure everybody wants to talk to someone, even me. I'm looking for more people to talk to. At times I go to the hub, I'm looking at the faces, where are my colleagues? I don't know, I don't see them. You know, unlike master where they study together, it's very easy. So, but don't feel I don't have anybody to talk to. You have a lot. All of us are looking for people to hang out with.
Absolutely.
Recently, Chikodi just called me and said, when am I coming to school? We need to talk. You know, we are colleagues back from Nigeria. She's a chartered accountant, I'm a chartered accountant, but we are talking of PhD now. So he said, when am I coming? So you can be sure when you call 2 people, you will discover that you may see 6 people.
Absolutely.
At your meeting. So there was a time we used to go to the beach, you know, side we organize, we go to beach, we go to Indian restaurant, we go to Asian restaurant, we go to African restaurant to dine at least once in a month. But the COVID didn't allow that again. And that bonding were there. And some of us are still talking. You know, I remember Said we're having a lecture online from 12 midnight to 2 a.m. in the morning. And after that, we start chatting, talking about life, you know. So don't think, Dr. Harrison is my second supervisor. I'm sure you must have experienced that he's a very tedious person. You have no option than to be at the top of your game, you know, but what your colleagues are going to do for you, your supervisor may not be able to do it. Everybody has a different role. So that's what I want to say. So there are many people going through that. Feel free to call any of your colleagues. If you call me, even if I'm not chance, I will connect you to someone else.
Somebody,
you know, just the way people have been connecting to me. And Dr. Abia is here. Once, you know, we can't put everything on her. You know, we cannot.
But honestly, I'm happy to help, and you know,
but, you know, we can also support each other. When we get to the roadblocks, then we can always get back to her.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you
so much. You are very welcome. You are very welcome, guys. I don't want to take more time from Dr. Kingesly because, you know, I know he's so busy. So thanks very much, Kingesly. Do you mind if you send me the slides?
Yes, I'll send the PDF slides. Then one thing we can do is maybe sometime in the coming months, we can have maybe a face-to-face event. I'm happy to come in so that we can use that to kind of bond, sell off things, that things we can't do online. More like a networking event. I'm happy to come.
We can have a dish kind of party, everyone just to bring
absolutely,
and we can enjoy ourselves, but after Ramadan.
Absolutely, after Ramadan, yes. But guys, I'm on LinkedIn. Please add me if you have anything you want me to. You want to have any questions on your transfer, Viva, send me a chat on LinkedIn. I will take it up from there. But thank you once again, and keep up the great work. I'm proud of you guys. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Dr. Kingesly.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.